Good evening and welcome to Gibson's Bookstore. I am Elizabeth, the events coordinator for Gibson's Bookstore. We are joined this evening by Bishop Rob Hirschfeld, whose book With Sighs Too Deep for Words, Grace, and Depression has recently come out this year, and we are very pleased to have you with us this evening, Bishop Rob. This book is available from Gibson's Bookstore. We do ship, offer curbside pickup, and we are open in a limited capacity for browsing. We are happy to offer this book to you. Bishop Rob, thank you for joining me this evening.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
Please, can you tell me a little bit about this book? Tell me about the genesis of this book.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Thanks. And I was at Gibson's after doing the curbside thing today, and I got to go in and I signed some of these books, and everyone was just so welcoming and great. So we love Gibson's. So the book. It started when I had a sabbatical. I had an extended leave for a time, and I was really curious about what learning to live with depression was about, and the emphasis was on living, not dying or suffering through it, but living, even though depression has certainly claimed many lives. I share a statistic in the book that annually in America, in the United States, depression claims more lives than has claimed American servicemen and women in the Vietnam War. And that's annually, that's every year. And I was talking to a lot of friends and just decided, this is part of who I am. And it's a part that I've mostly, and those who are close to me will say that's not true. I haven't successfully hid it. But it's not been part of my overt public narrative. And it seemed to me that it would be a service to expose that part, to share it, so that those who are suffering know that there's somebody who loves them, who is a pastor, a bishop no less, who knows what this is, at least pretty closely. It's not something that, Christianity is ostensibly a religion that emphasizes joy. Jesus talks a lot about joy. When I was in church, there was a lot of the word rejoicing, and St. Paul says, rejoice. Again, I say rejoice always. But the other part of a life of faith, which is the part of struggle, which goes back to the earliest pages of the Hebrew Bible, of the Old Testament, and Jacob wrestling with an angel at night, and then is wounded, is marked for life afterwards, after that wrestling with the angel. Saul clearly has mental illness issues. Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane is said to have struggled and weeps and sweats blood. And when he talks about joy, when Jesus talks about joy, it's on the night before his execution. So this is not merely being happy. So it seemed to me that this would be an exercise of exploring my own faith. So that's the genesis of it. And there have been a number of people who have led the way in sharing their own story about depression.
So this book, The Present Climate, is very stressful, and there has been quite a few people who have struggled. There are several aspects that can bring on depression. There is a chemical imbalance in your brain. There's situational things going on. There's many different things that can go on. But the present climate has probably brought many, many people into depression. Has
Yeah.
this helped you, this book and these meditations that you have developed, has this helped you in the present climate and the state of the world? Has it helped
Hmm.
people who have read the book?
Thanks for raising that, because this climate, I wrote this book last summer, and there was no mention of COVID. COVID wasn't even on the radar. It wasn't part of our lexicon. Um, Black Lives Matter was. The environmental crisis and the climate crisis certainly was. And there are a lot of different environmental, by that I mean kind of societal stresses that have played a big role in my own depression. Um, so when I wrote the book, um, I think I've gotten a number of just really, for me, humbling letters where people have shared. They've been expressions of gratitude, and they've shared their own stories of dislocation, spiritual quandary, feeling really adrift. Um, it's a time for somebody like me, and I'll just say this. I mean, I'm a white man. I'm straight. I have, you're in my office. I mean, this is a nice office. I am a man of considerable privilege. I am educated. In some ways, there's a book, I think, about being referred to as, born on third base. If you're going around the bend, going around the bases, I was probably born somewhere between third base and home. I mean, my family wasn't perfect, and they were just a straight up middle class family in Connecticut. Um, and now we're recognizing and having a mirror set up before us and realizing that those privileges, by and large, have cost others. They have cost the planet resources, um, and there's a kind of reckoning and an emotional, political, economic, racial reckoning going on, and it's difficult. It's very painful, and it requires of us a kind of resilience in order to step aside, which is, I think, what we're being called to do. And if your life has been about, and you've been told all your life, you got to get to the front of the line somehow. That's been sort of part of my upbringing and my educational, sort of imprint. Now, to be called, and I think it's a real kind of vocation. It's this idea of a reckoning suggests that we need to maybe not talk so much and to listen more, and maybe step aside on in some ways. That's a kind of existential, that can lead to a kind of existential threat, as they say. And you wonder, well, then what is my purpose if it's not to get to the front of the line? Instead, it's to come alongside. That is, I think, just to your point, I think that's answering your question. It's very disruptive. And disruptive, I've been in the meetings, and the word disruption is now a good thing. It used to be a bad thing, but now we're to welcome disruption, which sometimes could mean a disruptive to your emotional, psychological landscape, and the furniture in your head gets shifted around.
Have you found that with your public discussion about depression, has it made you feel a closer connection with your church family?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's been really amazing. I mean, one of the risks and the downsides of being a bishop is that it can be very isolating. I mean, you don't have the week in, week out, day in, day out connection with a congregation. And now, not many of us do, because of COVID and the lockdown and this social distancing. And as much as I'm an introvert, I also crave that and miss it. The book and my sort of self-disclosure has allowed the clergy from all over the country, not just in New Hampshire, to write me and say, I struggle with that too. A lot of priests and deacons and lay leaders, we spend a lot of time alone praying, and we don't get a lot of affirmation in those prayers. Sometimes it's just all that comes back is silence and the sound of our own breath, and maybe the sound of the bats in the belfry. They're not angels, but they're bats. And that can be very dispiriting and depressing and jarring sometimes, even if you've been doing it for 30, 40 years. So it's been wonderful to have really honest conversations with people of all stripes, who will tell me, this is what it's like, and I can say, I know.
So you've mentioned your peers and other members of the church. How have the members, the lay members of your church, how have they responded? Have you received many messages from them saying, this has been a way for me to explore this?
Yeah, I have. We're not talking hundreds, but enough of expressions of gratitude. One person said, I'm amazed that you see me. You see me, you hear me. It's as though you're writing my story. And that was the hardest thing about writing the book. It was last summer. I hated every minute of writing this little book because it meant I had to go back, remember, sometimes invite the experience itself of a kind of depressive episode, and to recall, what does this feel like? Like, what does it feel like physically? What does it feel like psychologically, emotionally? Because if I couldn't do that, I'm not sure it would have connected. But I just wanted to the best of my ability to just share what does this feel like? What is this like? And it's so hard. I mean, the lexicon for depression is kind of limited. It's not like a pain. You fall out of a tree and you break your leg. You stub your toe. You can see the redness on the toe. You cut yourself on the cutting board. There's evidence of it. People can walk around and live lives of quiet desperation and seem like, they're the class clown, which I have done in my class in the House of Bishops plenty of times. There's songs for that, the tears of the clown, So yeah, so I've been really appreciative and, really moved by the expressions of sympathy, not just, oh, poor Rob, poor Bishop, nothing like that, but you know what this feels like. And that's gotta help. It helps me to know that there's a kind of lightening of the burden, a kind of lifting, knowing that someone else is in this.
So you mentioned your writing. Did you have a section bookmarked that you'd like to read for us?
Well, I kind of came back.
Did the sticky note come out?
What's that?
Did the sticky note fall?
The sticky note come out, yeah.
I do want to ask our audience and remind them that we will be answering questions. So if
Great.
you do have questions that you'd like to type in while Rob finds his page number again, it is good to have them prepared so that we can take a look at them. If you can't find it, Rob, I do have other questions.
Okay.
What did you hope to accomplish with this book when you set out to write it? What was your goal?
I'm. There's been a little conversation in my household, but my goal was really, I wanted to save lives by simply adding a voice of someone who is ostensibly in a position of authority. For those who really struggle and are kind of on the edge. And the dedication was for all the saints who are still striving and all the saints at rest. We are living through an epidemic of depression, and it's not, we're talking about an epidemic of COVID. So the issues around mental health, mental illness have always been submerged in the popular, in the public discourse, and I just felt like the Association of Mental Illness, National Association, NAMI, their motto is "You are not alone," and that's effective. And I wanted to add my voice to that in order to help relieve the suffering of others. I can't fix it, but I can say I'm there with you.
So is there an aspect of faith that you lean on the most when you are struggling with yourself, or that you advise people to lean on when they themselves are struggling?
Yeah. I try to lean into the idea that Jesus is the compassionate one, and that God's self has chosen to share the suffering of humanity, and by becoming a human being. And this is not a human being who comes in with glory or controlling power or particular flashiness or attractiveness. In fact, this is a God who's chosen to enter into the depressed part of human experience. And simply to remind ourselves that just to be, just to draw breath, just to share life in a community is sufficient. And I believe that part of faith is to remind ourselves of the abundant life which is found in sufficiency, in enoughness, in the fact that we're simply here, and that we're sharing a being, we're sharing an existence with a God who is known simply to exist. That's it. The fact that the ancient word for Yahweh is rooted in being. I am who I am. And so I go back to that, just the sufficiency of being and sharing an existence that I share with you. Even though we're disconnected, we're connected by sharing a humanity. There's so much that we don't share, but the fact that we, I presume, are hungry, we get lonely, we have ambitions sometimes. Sometimes those ambitions are dashed. We suffer heartache. We suffer joy. We have joy. These are things that just is about being. There's a bookmark that I've shared with a number of people in the church, both in the parish that I came from and here. This is a bookmark that was these words that came from a bookmark from Saint Teresa of Avila, who was a Spanish nun in the 16th century. And this was found tucked in one of her prayer books. And it was simply these words: Let nothing disturb you. Let nothing make you afraid. All things are passing. God alone never changes. Patience gains all things. If you have God, you lack nothing. God alone suffices. And these little bookmarks have flown out of of our churches, and we make them, and it's just a reminder of the sufficiency of God when we are going through times of deep privation and disconnection. I lean on that.
So it's only really in the last few decades that an emphasis on mental health has really been acknowledged at all, let alone an encouragement to pay attention to your own mental health has been just encouraged in the last 20 or 30 years.
Right.
So there are many people who would have come up through the church in an age when they were told just deal with it yourself. And
Right.
now it has become, you may reach out to friends and family and your fellow parishioners for help. And what do you say to those people who are not used to seeking help? And
Oh,
how do you reach people that need it but don't know how to ask?
yeah. Um, hmm. I think I think that's one of the motivations for writing the book, is that I'm now uh, exposed. I'm now, kind of out as one who has asked for help, and I get a lot of help. And I refer to this as my pit crew. I mean, I'm not really into NASCAR, and people wouldn't peg me for that, but I have amazing resources. I mean, I have a therapist of 25 years. They're spiritual directors. I have friends that I can call. There's a monk that I I call occasionally, and it's wonderful, and when it's reciprocated sometimes. I think one of your best-selling authors at Gibson's is Louise Penny, and Armand Gamache, the great chief inspector of that Québécois Sécurité in Montreal, and he refers to the four sayings of wisdom. Do you remember what they are? This has been more sermons than I can count that I've relied on the gospel according to Louise Penny and Armand Gamache. He says, if you can say these four things with integrity, there's really that. This is the secret to all wisdom.
I have them here. It says they're saying, I was wrong.
I was wrong. I'm sorry. I don't know. I need help. Yeah. That's been the motto to my being a bishop. When I came in as a bishop, I thought I knew everything. Every bishop does when and they're going to just fix everything. But then, or a parish priest, same thing. And it just, I think life just knocks that hubris out of you. And then you realize that the whole business is about coming alongside. And because that's what Jesus does. And admitting when we've made serious mistakes, when we've hurt others, when we've hurt ourselves. And that requires, you just can't, we were not meant to do this alone. We were not meant to walk through this journey, this lonesome valley alone, despite the old American hymn.
I have a friend who I said, I wanted to ask for help, but I didn't really want to put all that burden on one person's shoulders.
Right.
He looked at me and he said, well, it sounds like the burden is already on just one person's shoulders.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah. Right.
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 I needed to write that down, and
right.
Many hands makes for light work.
Yep.
So
right.
to share it makes
Jesus talks about, he says, come to me, all ye who travail and are carrying heavy burdens, Take my yoke upon you, for my burden is light. My rest is easy, my burden is light. And the idea of a yoke, is, like oxen, they're two. So he's coming, it's not just like, I'm going to give you my burden, or I'm going to take all of your burden, but we're going to do this together. And that's been a help. And it speaks to the point that you just made.
So we had a question from an audience member who says, is your honesty and authenticity in this book, which is what makes it valuable to so many of us, was that honesty too much for some in the church?
I don't know. I've got some letters that are of people who are grateful. But there are a lot of people who haven't written in. I'm not asking for more mail, but there are some folks who are close to me that when they read certain passages, especially my, having times when I just didn't want to be anymore, or times when I've experienced trauma at the hand of others, sexual trauma, that's a difficult part to read. That's hard to read. I've heard that, and and I think probably that was all the more reason why I had to write it, because I know, you can't be a priest for very long and hear and not hear of people's really the messiness of their lives. I like to sometimes quote Zorba the Greek, at least in the movie. I can't find it in the book, but in the movie, Zorba the Greek, he's asked, tell me about your life, and he says, well, I had a wife and kids, and I've, I got through this life. I've had the full catastrophe, and there is something about, being in the clergy, being in the church, which exposes us, which makes us involved and engaged with the full catastrophe of the human condition. And when the church errs, when the church messes up, when the church is not true to its mission, it's when it's chosen not to engage in the full catastrophe of life, when it's chosen not to be on the streets and to hear the cry of the poor and the suffering and the people who have been locked up, who are incarcerated for whatever reason, who are choosing not to listen to the cry of Black Lives Matter, Me Too, and so, yeah, and their stories, of course, we'd rather not hear, but that's what we're called to do.
We have a commenter say, thank you, Rob, for this book. The descriptiveness in your pages allows me to be more able to comprehend others. Additionally, it has allowed me to feel less judgmental about my own mental health issues, being anxiety. It also makes me feel happy that we are all able to share these feelings with each other so we can truly heal. Can you talk a little bit about anxiety and faith, and perhaps how, well, I have another question, which I will save, but just anxiety and faith as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, anxiety. Well, thank you for that comment. It's really, thank you so much. That makes it worth it. Thank you. Anxiety and worry. I have an ambivalent relationship with anxiety and worry. I worry, and then I tell people not to worry. Don't we all do that? We sort of get upset with people when they're around us and they're anxious, even though we might be, the champions of anxiety. I don't sleep well often. I do the best I can. And one time somebody told me that worrying is praying to the devil, which was really interesting, because I don't think of the devil in those terms, but there is something that in anxiety, that you give something of yourself to another force, to another presence. And sometimes I just need to remind myself to breathe and to read the bookmark. And I refer to the passage of a time, in the book, I refer to a time when I was going through just a really sad time, a breakup of a very young marriage. I didn't know what I was doing. I was in my early 20s. I was just going through the existential, chaos of trying to figure out what it meant to be me, who I am. And I remember going to, and I refer to this in the book, a spiritual director, Rachel Hosmer, who was this wonderful light in the Episcopal Church, now long gone from us. And she told me just to be silent. And I hadn't really experienced silence because I was just kind of thinking all the time and talking too much and trying to argue my way out of my anxiety, as though it made sense, as though it was based on some kind of illogical thing. And she referred me to this practice of just breathing and sharing the ego, eimi, which is the I am. It's Jesus who says, I am. There are all these passages in John's gospel and Jesus, they're referred to as the I am statements. And they have enormous power for me. So sometimes I just repeat and align my breathing, my inhale with the ego, and then exhale, eimi. And I'll do that as a kind of mantra, but it's also a prayer. Ego, eimi. It helps me go to sleep. It helps me settle. It helps me listen to whatever is. And it connects me to the being of all being, to the I am who will be for you, who I believe is God, is at the core understanding of my understanding of who God is. So that's been a remedy for me, in addition to, taking medication and seeing a therapist and making sure I get exercise, trying to make sure that I eat right, and all those other practices.
Someone asked, how has your life changed since you wrote this book?
Well, I'm seeing you. I got to meet you, Elizabeth, so that's life-changing. It hasn't solved anything. I think it's brought me into contact with people, fellow strugglers, fellow human beings, and that's been a great privilege, in the best sense of the word, privilege. I mean, it's been a real blessing, that I've been more in contact with folks who would not otherwise feel comfortable reaching out to me for whatever reason. I'm hearing from strangers from all over. That's been really, really moving. People I really admire and respect, who I've kind of admired from afar, have contacted me and shared some of their stories. And I realize that I'm not alone. That's been helpful for myself.
Someone asks, what is the best way to love someone who is in the midst of depression?
Yeah. There's a book called What to Do. What's the name of the book about? I refer to it somewhere. How to love someone who's in the midst of depression is something when someone you love is depressed, how to help your loved one without losing yourself. One thing that really, because it can be very stressful. We have, let me just back up. When I've shared in parish context, and at coffee hour, back when we had coffee hour, and I shared, and I've been asked, so tell us about this book you're writing. We've heard, tell us about it. And I've done just a show of hands. I've asked, has anyone here been touched by a mental illness? Not you yourself. I'm not asking anyone to share right now, unless you feel called to, but 100% of the hands go up. Either they themselves have experienced depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, or they know somebody who has, or they're living with somebody who has. So, it's everybody has been touched by this. So how do we live? How do we love someone? I think the worst thing to do is to say, get over it. Or what's wrong? It's such a beautiful day. Why you have so many gifts? All these are true. It's, I think, simply to just come alongside and say, I know it must hurt today. Is there anything I can say? And usually you'll say no. The person might say no, but to allow space, to offer a drink of cold water. I think it sometimes I find when I'm with somebody and there's somebody in our family who goes through a much more severe case of depression, and there are folks I know within my circle who do, and I find just being on a phone, not saying much, but just knowing that there's somebody there. And if you're living with that person, just staying in the room, not saying much, but just knowing that there's somebody there without judgment, but a sense of acceptance. Even if you know that the depression is intolerable, it's hard for everyone to live with, acknowledging that, but not blaming the sufferer for it.
I'm reminded a bit of the saying, do you want me to listen or do you want me to try and fix it? And which I feel like is a common relationship miscommunication. But oftentimes people try and fix things because, if you see someone suffering, you want to fix it and
That's
make
what we do. Right.
That is not necessarily what will help.
Right.
Because sometimes you can't fix.
No. Right.
So,
and that's our society. We need, we fix things. The people who are leaders, the people who are lifted up as our leaders, are those who tell us they're going to fix things.
Active listening is an act of love, is a comment that we see, and someone else mentions, and try not to blame yourself for your partner's depression.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
That we're
reminding yourself that this is not my, you are you and I am me, and we are in this, but that that you're not the reason. That's very important. Yeah.
We have quite a few positive comments in the chat, which I know you're focusing on the event. So I am keeping an eye on.
I have squirrel brain. I certainly, thanks.
You have been an inspiration to many of us, and someone said, I think your openness provides a level of acceptance to be able to open up about their own struggles, even within a group setting. So you really are showing people, you're leading by example right now. Thank you for your courage to share your personal journey of faith, depression, and anxiety, Bishop Rob. Hopefully that will lighten the burden of others who share a common struggle and lessen the stigma often associated with these matters. God bless all those who are burdened.
Yes.
And then another question here, how do you understand your depression, and at what age did you become aware?
Boy. When the earlier I go back in my life, in my memory, the more I think, oh, that was a sign. Like, what were you doing there? What was that about? And being in the playground in elementary school and kind of priding myself that I was really not connecting with people and feeling as though there's something there's something comforting in not joining others, that I was kind of pulling back. Was I listening to voices? What was that about? I think, um, you know, boy, they, I had an injury when I was a teenager. I was involved in a football accident and was paralyzed for a time, and that meant I had to be isolated. I was in traction. I was out of school. I had these tutors who came in occasionally. My parents were working. I spent a lot of time by myself, asking the big questions. You know, why are we here? What is existence? Um, why did a bad thing happen to? I thought myself a good person, not an evil person. And why do good things happen to bad people? I mean, I was, ruminating. And at one point, I talk about, in some cultures, depression is referred to as that the phenomenon of just thinking too much. And that was when I was 13, 14 years old, going through raging hormonal adolescence. Not a good time to be paralyzed. That was, I think, the beginning of perhaps either the beginning of a depression, um, or setting sort of the trajectory of depressive outlook, or the time when I was really wrestling with an angel and was being called to the priesthood. It could have been both. It could be both at the same time. What I knew was that this journey of life was not going to be an easy one, and it was going to take a toll. Um, and there was some alcoholism in the family. There was some just hard expectations that I just could not live up to, which just sort of kept feeling like I was getting driven down emotionally. So it was younger. That was one part of the question, and there was another. Was sort of when.
Let's see. How do you understand your depression?
Yeah, I think part of it is genetic. I think looking back at what I know of my grandparents, that they were not always the happiest people on the planet, and one of them died just before I was born. And to hear his story, that guy must have been depressed. And I'm named for him. My first name is Alfred. His name was Alfred. So there's something genetic. There's something about just the imprint of being in a family that had struggles, nothing like a lot of our families that we know, and something chemical. And I think the first question that you asked about, we're living in a society which is creating depression. It's hard for us not to have what's called the monkey brain, or comparison brain, where we're always being, compared with others who are more attractive, more smart, more wealthy, more together, more privileged, more righteous, more compassionate. I mean, in the church, it gets all kind of perverted in some ways. There's a kind of spiritual athleticism that goes on in the church. Oh my gosh, I can't be like Cynthia Bourgeois. I can't write like her, or Henry Nouwen, or these great stars. And then you think, well, they're just all about humility. So, the comparison mind in our capitalist society can be tough.
And then, especially with social media, you're comparing your blooper reel to everybody else's highlight reel.
Yeah.
You don't have everybody else's blooper reel. You have your own, though, and you're replaying your mistakes over and over again, but everybody else is posting their highlight reel. Right.
And so you got to be really careful with social media, I think. I have a love-hate relationship with social media. I've logged off for extended periods of time. When this book came out, I decided, and when COVID happened, it seemed like this was going to be a way to stay connected with people of all kinds in all areas of my life. So that's been a value. But man, one comment that just is a throwaway can really, like a nuclear bomb, can ruin your whole day, you know.
So we have a question from an audience member. Have you found yourself observing your children for signs of depression and
Oh yes.
anxiety? And how do you talk to them about it?
Mm. um, well, I share that this is not unusual, that it's not a judgment. It's not. There's a prayer in the Book of Common Prayer about not taking failure, and I would insert depression or anxiety, as a measure of your worth. I believe my children, like all children, are of infinite value, and that they and they and you know, I I'm more prone to just be with them and not talk so much, or to try to talk them out of their depression or their struggle. And there hasn't been there, I observe them. I don't think that they've experienced mental illness. Their struggles, their episodes. I don't think you know. I think we have to be careful now, because these are my kids, and I don't have their permission to talk about them. But there is something about that. The fact that they know that I've been in therapy, that was not anything that my my parents would have ever talked about. If not, it was to prove that they didn't need therapy. If they went into therapy, it was to just, I told him off. It was clearly I wasn't. So they don't have that relationship with the phenomenon of psychotherapy or counseling, and I'm grateful for that. They know that I take medication. They've seen episodes when I've gone, I've dipped down. I've had flashes of anger. Irritability is a symptom of depression. That's something that my family has unfortunately had to see. I write about that in the book. That was really not fun to write about, but I think it was really important, because men like me are not good about anger. It's not something we talk about, and as a result, it gets the best of us. And we're seeing that taking place on a societal level right now.
Well, with your children, as a commenter says, you have left the door open for them to come to you if they need to, which is possibly the best thing a parent can do. Knowing that they can trust you to come to you, and that if they need you, you will be there.
Yeah, both Polly and I have done that, and I have to say one thing about my my kids. One of the best blessings about my 3 children is to see how well they support and love each other, and that they, even if they look at their parents askew and think, "Oh my gosh, let us not be like them," which I think all healthy children do. I might be going on a limb there. They really look out for and support each other, and are completely honest with each other, and that is something for which I am deeply and eternally grateful.
So we've just about reached the end of our hour here. You mentioned that, I will mention to our audience members one more time, that Gibson's Bookstore does have this book available. We do ship, we do offer curbside pickup. You do not have to come into the store to get this book, and we are open for limited browsing. Bishop Rob, you mentioned that you might want to close out this event with leading us through a meditation, a very brief meditation. Did you have one in mind that you'd like to walk us through?
I could one. This is not for many in the in the audience, this may not be new. It's a portion of the Psalms, Psalm 47, and they may have done this exercise, but it's the portion of the Psalm, "Be still and know that I am God." And I'll just walk us through that. We'll just meditate on that just for a minute, if we have a minute. I think we do, yeah. Just find a comfortable place in our chair and try to just open ourselves to this portion of the Psalms. Be still and know that I am God, says God. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know. Be still and know. Be still. Be. Be. Be still and know that I am God. Thanks. I hope, the book is about depression, but I hope it's as much about the seeking after joy and what the deep joy, not just the frivolous happiness that we all kind of can be addicted to, and we get angry when we don't have it, but that deeper sense of the joy that comes from the sufficiency of being alive in this wonderful, tragic, beautiful, and broken world.
On that note of peace, thank you very much, Bishop Rob, for joining us. Thank you, everybody joining us from home. Go in peace and have a great night, everybody.
Thanks a lot, Elizabeth. See you at the bookstore.
See you at the bookstore.